former Director HR and Legal at IFFCO, and former Managing Director of IFFCO Kisan Logistics Limited, Mr. R P Singh.
Trade unions are also human beings. Leaders are also human beings. And they represent a constituency. They have been elected by the workers and they represent that interest group.
How do you personally read whether the discussion is moving towards resolution or towards deadlock?
We should always consider the viewpoint of the other side, and that will really give you a sort of leverage in negotiations.
Hello everyone and welcome to FaceTime with Leaders, powered by Directors Institute, World Council of Directors. I'm your host, Sunny Pancholi, and today's guest is someone who has spent close to 5 decades, yes, 5 decades working in areas that most organizations quietly depend on: human resources, industrial relations, legal compliances, and governance. Joining us is Mr. R P Singh, former Director, HR and Legal at IFFCO, and former Managing Director of IFFCO Kisan Logistics Limited.
Thank you very much, Sunny. It is indeed a matter of great pleasure for me to be here today.
Great. So Mr. Singh began his career in the 1970s, working with organizations such as Telco, British India Corporation, and Pyrites, Phosphates and Chemicals Limited, before joining IFFCO in 1996. And over the years, he has handled large-scale HR systems, complex industrial relations, long-term wage settlements, mergers and acquisitions, global joint ventures, and board-level governance responsibilities in India and overseas. He has also served on the governing bodies of the Indian Council of Arbitration and PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, represented industry at the International Labour Conference in Geneva, and received the Dr. Patna Singh Memorial Corporate Lifetime Achievement Award in 2025. So, Mr. Singh, very warm welcome to the show and thank you for being here with us today.
Pleasure is all mine, Sunny. And I think you have already spoken a lot about my long career. But let me tell you, this career has been really very satisfying for me. And during this period, I'm happy that I had experience in very diverse fields. You know, usually the people looking after human resource management are not supposed to be looking after legal jobs and arbitration, and these are in fact diametrically opposed things. But I did get a chance, and I consider myself lucky for that.
Great. So, Mr. Singh, when people look at a long career like yours, they usually see the senior roles and recognitions. But careers are shaped more by early moments than by later titles. So, my first question to you is, if you could look back now, where do you think this journey really began for you, not professionally, but personally? And was there a moment from your early life or early career that shaped how you think about work, people, and responsibility?
You are very right. In fact, the careers are shaped not at the later part. In fact, it starts with the childhood. And more so in my case, you know, I was born in a very remote rural background, and I lost my parents at the infancy stage itself. So I was brought up by my grandparents and my uncle. So we didn't have any kind of a scarcity, of course. And as an infant, I didn't really understand the loss of parents, what impact it had on my life. But as I grew up, I was a happy-go-lucky kind of child. So I would be loving playing with kids and eating and sleeping and all that, because we didn't have, as a farmer, we did have enough land and we didn't have any kind of a scarcity. Of course, we didn't have any surpluses. But I didn't realize that what actually should I be doing. So one fine morning, when maybe I was about 7 or 8 years of age, my grandmother called me and asked me to sit beside her. And then she counseled with me. She said that, look, your parents are not there. She first talked about them, that how good they were, and she lamented their loss. Then she said that, look, usually in the society, what happens? The parents look after the child, and when the child grows up and becomes a man, he or she look after the parents, who then gradually grow old. In your case, your parents are not there. We grandparents are very old, and we may not be there by the time you become a man. So, and today your uncle doesn't have children, but when he fathers children, his love for you may not be the same as it is today, and when we are not there. So, the most important thing for you is to study, concentrate in your studies, and try to stand on your own feet. So that somehow or the other, that really, hit me very hard, and it gave me a realization that I should be, some kind of very, realization that I didn't have the kind of support that usually children would have. So I developed a sense of responsibility, and also a kind of resilience in my mind, and sense of determination that I must do something. And that's when the whole thinking of mine changed, and I started concentrating on my studies. I graduated with political science honors. And then second turning point that came was after graduation. By that time, I mean, the grandparents had already become very old. The grandmother, in fact, had already expired. Grandfather was still there. But my uncle said that, look, if you want to do something, you have to change the place. Instead of staying at Bhagalpur, which is a very small place, you must shift to Patna, and you should carry out your pursue further studies in Patna. And you should also at the same time appear for competitive exams. So when I shifted to Patna, I lost all my friends. I mean, those were their childhood friends and college friends. And in Patna, I was all alone. I felt isolated, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because then I concentrated on my studies, and I, in fact, topped the list as MA and labor and social welfare, and I was awarded gold medal, and that really helped me in shape my career. So that was the kind of early impact that I had on my personal life, which shaped my career.
Wow, what a start to this conversation, Mr. Singh. And it's interesting how those early, almost unnoticed moments end up becoming the compass for everything that we do later. And, I can really feel how that experience still sits at the center of the way you operate today. Great. All right. So, moving ahead, Mr. Singh, you have negotiated long-term wage settlements at PPCL and then repeatedly at IFFCO across 3 different decades, which is something very few leaders even experience, ever experience for once. So when you walk into those rooms, how do you personally read whether the discussion is moving towards resolution or towards deadlock? And over the years, has your style of negotiation changed as unions, workforces, and expectations have evolved? Also, what is the one mistake you see younger HR leaders make when they think wage settlements are mainly about numbers?
Sunny, I'll tell you first, before I come to a question, let me give you some background, how I entered into this kind of, industrial relations specialization. In Tata Motors and British India Corporation, it was all my learning stage. So I was a management trainee and I learned there. When I joined Pyrites, Phosphates and Chemicals, way back in 1978, the wage negotiations were going on. wage revision was due from 1st of July 1977. And at that point of time, this was a public sector. So at that point of time, the government control was there. Wage revision had to be done with the approval of the government. So discussions were going on, and the government had announced a policy that henceforth PSU employees will not be governed by central DA pattern. DA means dearness allowance, which is one of the components of wage structure. So there is one basic, the other is dearness allowance, and then other perquisites. So dearness allowance in public sector undertakings was governed by central government formula, which was applicable to even central government employees. But that at that point of time, government took a decision that no, we must delink the industrial workers from central government employees. So a new formula for industrial workers was devised. The conflict between the trade unions and the management was that trade unions always wanted to stay with the central DA system, whereas the management was under instruction and under obligation from the government that they must switch over. And that was the crucial moment when I joined. So when I joined, I was told that, look, some of the Bangalore-based industries have already switched over from central DA to industrial DA. So you should go and study there, how they have done the whole structure, how the transition has taken place. And then on that basis, we'll work out our strategy here and discuss. So I was sent there. And I studied and then came back and apprised the top management, and then we started negotiations. I was at that stage, I was only assisting my senior leaders, but that gave me a heads up as far as the whole concept of wage revision, the structure, how these structures are made, how the cost of living index is worked out, and all that. So that was the reason, and that was the kind of background that I had. So when we started discussing, at that time I was very young. So when the senior people were discussing, sometimes some facts will come up, which the unions would say something, I would say, no, this is not factually correct. And that would give a very strong reaction from the trade unions. Who is this fellow? Tell him not to speak in front of us. So that gave me some kind of, not a setback, but a lesson to learn. That when you are into wage negotiation, you have to be patient. So outside the negotiations, when we were sitting, the CHRO told me that, look, you have to consider one thing always. Trade unions are also human beings. Leaders are also human beings, and they represent a constituency. They have been elected by the workers, and they represent that interest group. So they have their own internal pressures, because it's, after all, they have been there by virtue of elections. So some minority unions will also be there, or some leaders who have lost. So they will also always be behind them and trying to pull their leg. So we have not to be very, cutthroat or very formal in discussions. We should always be empathetic. We should always consider the viewpoint of the other side. And that will really give you the sort of leverage in negotiations. So from that I learned, and I found that first, it has to be very informal. Second, it has to be a matter of patience. And third, you have to understand the psychology of the other side. So it's not always a matter of numbers. When you are negotiating with the trade unions, it's not always the numbers. If you take a rigid stand, then they also harden their stand. But if you slowly go and win their trust, of course, it's not a matter which can be done in a day or two. But since I started early on, and got involved into wage negotiations. So that gave me a kind of opportunity which really helped me to sharpen my skills. And later on, I think I never found any difficulty in dealing with unions, because I had by that time nurtured a kind of credibility for myself, that they would also know that this fellow is very mild in discussions, but he will be firm. And if something is not going to be given, he will not agree. So any kind of undue pressure will not work on him. So this is what has really taught me how to go about. In IFFCO, of course, there was not much, because it was a cooperative organization. All the trade union leaders were internal, and they really understood the interest of the organization. And over a period of time, earlier days, militancy was there in trade union movement. You would have seen several industries in West Bengal and Kerala and Bihar and Maharashtra getting shut down because of the trade union militancy. But over a period of time, post-emergency, there was a realization amongst the trade unions also that eventually the interest of workers lies in the prospering industries. So this is how I developed, and then I became an expert in negotiation. Every time they will say, "Acha, ye wala jo hai, ye aap kara lo trade union se."
All right. Okay. Mr. Singh, the clarity with which you described those moments really stayed with us. And, it's rare to hear someone explain the undercurrent, not just the outcome.
Yes.
So, truly, very insightful. And thank you for sharing those insights with us. All right. So, continuing our conversation, Mr. Singh, you played a key role in implementing Oracle HRMS and IFFCO at a time when digital HR systems were still new to large public and cooperative institutions in India.
Yes.
And on paper, technology promises transparency, efficiency, fairness, but on the ground, it often creates anxiety and resistance, right? So, what surprised you most when HR moved from files and registers to dashboards and databases? And where do large organizations usually misjudge the human side of HR digitization?
Sunny, in case of IFFCO, it was not like that. Here, the chief executive was a very progressive person. Dr. IFFCO was the managing director, and he always believed in the latest technology, whether it's for running the plant or for managing the office work. So, in fact, in IFFCO, we had introduced computers and printers way back in 1995-96. And at that point itself, he thought that now the whole system that should be paperless. So he said that let us evolve a system of human resource management for our employees, which should be 100% computerized. And he had already deployed all sorts of, LAN and WAN and all that. So a local area network of computers and wide area network, all the units were also connected. So we first gave a contract to HCL Technologies to develop an HRMS for us. They came, they started developing. Employees were not very apprehensive, but they felt that the moment this system is introduced, their job will be. We were, in fact, very consciously in dialogue with the employees that, look, this is not going to take away your jobs. But right now, what you are doing is you are doing typewriting and then correcting and then again doing it. So all these things will become very easy, and you will also be able to keep data, retrieve data, all that. So, and being a cooperative, they were also very assured that, look, we are not going to lose our jobs. So that kind of resistance was not there. But when the whole system was prepared and it came for implementation, it could not succeed. Lots of problems were there. So then the discussions took place between us and HCL representatives. Their challenge was that in those days, software people were highly in demand. So the turnover was very high. So people will leave the job, and every 3 months or so, HCL would change the person in charge here or the people working on the development. So a lot of communication gap was there. So when the system was implemented, it didn't work well. So they said that no, this was not told to us by the employees. I mean, it is for the people who are in that domain to tell us that what are their requirements, what should be the business rules and all that. So during that discussion, we came to a conclusion that it is not really only the software people or the developers that they will develop the system for us. We also have to, as domain experts, we have to be in interaction with them, and we have to give them the feedback how the business rules should be framed, what are our functional needs and all that. So then we hired Oracle. Oracle had their own system, but we had already learned our lesson from the previous failure. And by that time, employees had also become very conscious and very active, that they felt that this will really help us in our improving our efficiency and reducing our job and making it less complicated. So there was no resistance as such, unlike many other organizations where computerization was considered to be, some kind of an anathema, that this will lead to unemployment and all. But of course, those people who are old timers, they took time to grasp the whole situation and start using the system. Of course, the younger ones who came, it was much easier for them to follow through, but the older ones, they will confine themselves to only that area which was assigned to them, nothing else. So this is how, but it really did give advantage to us. I mean, later on, we in fact went into all sorts of software schemes for maintenance, preventive maintenance, and all that. Because in case of IFFCO, the leader was such that he always wanted the best of technology.
Mr. Singh, that was incredibly insightful, and you made the human side of digitization feel so real and relatable. What really stands out is how honestly you spoke about the fear and hesitation behind the scenes. And,
Yes.
it's rare to hear that side of digital transformation.
Yes.
All right. So, moving on. Apart from corporate roles, you have served on arbitration bodies, government panels, international cooperative committees, and represented Indian industry at the ILO in Geneva. That puts you in a space where business interests, labor rights, law, and public policy constantly overlap. Now, from that vantage point, how do you see the role of HR evolving in India over the next decade? Part B of my question is, do you think organizations are genuinely prepared for the new labor codes and the changing expectations of younger workers?
See, you have asked too many questions. New labor codes are a different ball game altogether. The advantage only with the new labor code is that it was passed about 2-3 years ago, and the implementation is going to take place now. So during this period of 3 years, lots of discussions have taken place at various fora, and people are mentally now prepared and geared up for that. Having said that, the challenge with all the private, especially the private sector people, is that this is going to substantially increase their financial burden, because some of the provisions are such that the past practices are going to be impacted. Provident fund contribution is going to increase, and various other things, because the new labor codes have certain obligations to fulfill, which earlier used to be avoided by structuring the whole compensation system in such a manner that you could keep the financials tight. So that is one. As far as the International Labour Organization is concerned, this is an arm of UNO, United Nations, and this was set up way back in 1921, even before the United Nations was set up. The idea was to have a standard, labor standards, which should be uniform, at least the basic human rights that must be taken care of in the working class. So it should be standardized. So this consists of representatives of employers, unions, and the government. It's a tripartite organization, and it frames recommendations and conventions and labor standards, which are then circulated to all the member countries who are signatory to the International Labour Code. So they are supposed to implement those conventions and standards in their countries. So it was a very different kind of experience, because what we are doing here as employers or as unions, it's quite apart from that. When the representatives of government and employers and employees from all over the countries assemble at one place, there are different pressure groups. The developed countries have a very different kind of interest. Developing countries and underdeveloped countries have a very different kind of interest. So the kind of standards that the developed countries would like to be set, so that the cost of, because they are not able to compete in the market because of the high cost of living and high standards that they follow. So they would like that to be implemented across the board. But countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and African countries, they would not like it. So it was a different kind of scenario there. I was really, it was an eye-opener for us to see what kind of clash or coordination is working in developing the international standards. So they are not concerned with the nitty-gritties. They are only concerned with the broad parameters. So the discussions are at that level. That was the International Labour Organization. As far as the Indian Council of Arbitration is concerned, that's basically dealing with the arbitrations. And arbitrations are, in fact, quasi-judicial functions. They're governed by the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. And an arbitrator has to be like a judge. So he's supposed to hear both sides and then give his award, which is, for arbitration, it is called award. Otherwise, if it is judiciary, then it is called judgment. So I had the fortune of having served as an arbitrator in as many as 6 matters of international dispute and some domestic disputes as well. And in some of the arbitrations, I was a co-arbitrator with a retired Supreme Court judge also. So we were together in the bench. So there you have to be very law-abiding, strict, objective, and impartial. Any interest, if you have, you must disclose it upfront, so that the parties to the dispute will decide whether they'll go ahead with you or not. So, and once you are into it, then you have to give equal opportunity to both sides, and then you have to take a reasoned decision and render your award. Your awards are subject to challenge in the court of law in accordance with law. Therefore, you have to be very cautious, that because your reputation, is built on the basis of how far your awards remain unchallenged. So that's a very different game. Now, coming back to human resources, the current human resource scenario is that AI and machine learning have changed the entire landscape. The younger generation also has different value system, different kind of expectations. So while they would be very ambitious, expecting everything for themselves, they are not equally considerate about the other side, about the employers. So that they lack a little bit of empathy, which I would suggest that younger generations should be, a little more empathetic. And for that, I think mentoring and coaching will help. So that's all.
Absolutely, Mr. Singh. And you tied policy, people, and generational change together so naturally that it almost felt like we were talking and walking through those committee rooms with you. Great conversation. All right, so welcome back to FaceTime with Leaders, and we are in conversation with Mr. R P Singh. Okay, so let's move ahead, and the next segment is called Rapid Fire Round, Mr. Singh. Let's not talk about policy negotiations and boardrooms for now. This round is for quick questions, honest, quick answers, no long stories, no overthinking, nothing. So, are you ready for it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here should be with the first question. Yes. If you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
I would be myself.
Okay, that was great. All right, next question. What's your guilty pleasure?
No, I like eating sweets and lots of them. So that's my guilty pleasure.
All right, nice. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's very difficult because I generally don't stay with one food all the time. But yes, if it happens to be that, then the simple Indian food, roti, dal, sabji, and chawal.
Absolutely. Filling, tasty, and classic.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
That I would have dinner with Mahatma Gandhi. And I just wanted to ask him one question. That had it been Hitler instead of Britishers occupying India, what would have been his, strategy for Andolan Satyagraha? Whether Satyagraha would have worked with the Germans like it did work with the Britishers? So that is one question has always been bothering me. And I would, if I had dinner with Mahatma Gandhi, I would have discussed this issue with him.
Wow, and that's truly thought-provoking. Great. All right. What's a hobby you have always wanted to pick up but never did?
I had a fascination for tabla playing. I wanted, but and I tried also, but I found it very difficult, and I didn't have time for that. That is one fascination I had, and which I eventually could not do.
Okay, great. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Swimming. Yes.
All right.
I don't know swimming.
What's your favorite? Sorry?
I don't know swimming. So that is an area where I lack my expertise. So if I had the chance, I would have become expert in swimming.
Absolutely. Right. Okay, great. Moving forward, what's your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Usually, for me, whatever may be whether it is a long day or short day, unwinding takes place with walking and reading and sleeping.
Awesome. What's the most random item on your bucket list?
I think of writing my own memoir about my journey.
Okay, that's a great thought. All right. What's something you have never done, but you think everyone should try at least once?
In fact, everyone, I don't know, but I should have, done this tabla playing. I don't know about everyone. If I had to talk about everyone, then I would say that everyone should go to Himalayas for a week or so and reflect.
Okay, okay. Right. Two great things to do. One, learning tabla. Of course, what's life without music? And self-reflection is one thing that everybody must do to, keep growing.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So, if you could speak any language fluently, which one would you choose?
Mandarin.
Why?
Because that's the future of the business and global ecosystem and geopolitics.
Okay, great. So that was all for the rapid fire round, Mr. Singh. Now, moving forward with the next segment of questions, which is about industry realities, risk, and the road ahead. Mr. Singh, the fertilizer and cooperative sector sits in a very sensitive position today, balancing government policy, farmer expectations, global supply chains, and rising operational costs. From where you stand, what is the biggest structural challenge this industry is quietly struggling with right now? Is it regulations, talent availability, or labor related?
There are several things that are, to be addressed when we are talking of fertilizer industry. First thing is that India has a shortage of raw materials for fertilizers. So we are dependent upon other countries for gas, for phosphoric acid, and for potash. So fluctuation in the dollar really impacts our industry. The other is that our consumers are farmers, and farmers do not have, by the way, the paying capacity. So the prices of fertilizers have to be kept low for it to become affordable for the farmers. So a lot of government intervention is there. Government fixes the prices at a lower level and subsidizes the product. Obviously, when you are dependent upon government policy and subsidy, you don't have a free hand. So lots of regulations are there, which we are struggling. And we always tell in fertilizer industry that we are asked to swim with our hands and legs tied. And despite that, the advantage is that fertilizer is needed for food security. And therefore, the demand for fertilizer will always be there. Now, we have been trying very hard to work out something which will replace the dependence on imports. And in that field, in fact, IFFCO has done a great job. We have innovated fertilizers which are known as nano fertilizers. So the import will be drastically reduced because the requirement of raw materials will be almost 100 times lower than what is the present requirement. But that's a very at a nascent stage, because it is very difficult to convince the farmers to go for those new products, and it has been done in a liquid form, and it requires dilution in water and then spraying. So labor shortage is another problem. Farmers don't want to, spend money on spraying. They say that this is uneconomical. So we are working out the possibilities how to do it. So we have introduced some schemes for spraying by drones. Honorable Prime Minister was also very much impressed by our drone scheme. So he has further introduced that Namo Drone Didi scheme, under which ladies, unemployed ladies are trained as drone operators, and they are made drone entrepreneurs. So this is the stage at which fertilizer industry is there. And I think I don't see much change. Of course, the recent budget has talked of direct benefit transfer to farmers. So the idea is that instead of paying subsidy to the industry, they are paying subsidy to the industry because it is easier to administer. If they have to pay to some 50 million farmers or 100 million farmers directly, then so many problems are there. I mean, there are several challenges. Who is doing his own farming, who is not doing, who is an absentee landlord, and all sorts of things. So whether it will have a good impact or bad impact will always be there. Scarcity is still there. Food security is a reason because of which fertilizer has industry as such has a lasting future, but we have to work out newer ways to decrease the subsidy burden and to reduce dependence on imports.
That was such an honest and eye-opening breakdown, Mr. Singh, and hearing the invisible pressure of this sector explained so clearly really shifts my perspective. And you have articulated the quiet stress behind these decisions in such a grounded way. And it's rare to hear someone unpack the complexity with this level of clarity. Great, Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
All right. So, after decades of hands-on leadership, legal responsibility, and board exposure, you still chose Directors Institute, which I think says something about how you look at learning still. So, what made you feel that this was the right time to step into that kind of structured program?
Sunny, people do have knowledge and experience, but the kind of requirement that a corporate structure would have, the kind of expectations from independent directors are there. All those things at one place are not available unless you go to some institute. So I did some search on the net and found that Directors Institute was the best place to be there and get associated with them. And then I connected with one of the one of the webinars of Directors Institute, and I was impressed. And I'm really very, very happy to see the kind of content that I have got and the manner in which they are, trying to explain things, and the videos, the books, they're all very crystal clear and very thought-provoking. And I'm really enjoying the learning as well as the new networking. Thank you very much for that.
Great, Mr. Singh. The way you described the turning point and the need to evolve felt incredibly real. And it's rare to hear a senior leader like you speak so openly about growth and reinvention. All right. So, Mr. Singh, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your experiences so openly. What stands out from this conversation is how leadership, especially in large institutions, is built less on big speeches and more on steady judgment, the kind that balances people, policy, and long-term responsibility. So thank you so much once again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure was all mine. All the best. Bye.
Thank you. And for our listeners, whether you work in HR, operations, governance, agriculture, or any other field, I hope today's discussion offered something practical to reflect on about handling complexity, earning trust, and staying grounded over long careers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into FaceTime with Leaders, powered by Directors Institute, a World Council of Directors. I'm your host, Sunny Bancholi, signing off for now. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.